My son said he didn't need me until his life fell apart without my prayers. I'll never forget the morning he said those words to me. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and there I was, same as every day for the past 40 years, kneeling beside my bed with my worn Bible open, humming the old hymns my mama taught me. My son walked past my door, coffee in hand, briefcase already packed for another busy day. He paused, shook his head, and let out a small laugh. Not cruel but dismissive, like watching a child play pretend. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't need all that. I'm doing just fine on my own." He didn't wait for my response. He never did. The door closed behind him, and I was left there in the dim candlelight, my prayers hanging in the air like smoke with nowhere to go. I didn't argue. A mother's love doesn't need permission. But deep in my heart, I whispered a truth he couldn't hear yet. We all need something to hold us when our own hands fail. Welcome, my dear. This is Grandma Alice Stories, where every tale carries a lesson and every wound carries wisdom. Sit close, pour yourself some tea and settle in, because today's story is about faith, pride, and the kind of fall that teaches you what was holding you up all along. Life has its own way of humbling us, child. And sometimes the people we push away are the very ones keeping us standing. My son Daniel was always a bright boy, sharp mind, quick tongue, ambition that burned hotter than any stove I ever cooked on. From the time he was young, he wanted more than this small town could offer. More than the simple life his father and I built with our bare hands. I never blamed him for that. Dreams are good things. They keep your heart beating when the world tries to slow it down. But somewhere along the way, between the college degrees and the corner office and the expensive suits, Daniel started to believe he'd done it all by himself. He forgot the nights I stayed up praying over scholarship applications. He forgot the sacrifices his father made, working double shifts so our boy could have a future we never did. He forgot that success isn't just built on talent. It's built on the prayers whispered in the dark by people who love you before you even know your own name. I didn't live with Daniel anymore. He'd moved across town into one of those modern apartments with glass walls and marble countertops. The kind of place that looks beautiful but never feels like home. He'd visit me every few weeks, usually on Sundays after church. Well, after my church. He'd stopped going years ago. Said he didn't have time for it. Said religion was for people who needed comfort, and he'd found his comfort in control. In planning. In building his own empire. I'd make him his favorite meal. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, just like when he was a boy, and we'd sit at my old wooden table, the one his father built before he passed. Daniel would talk about his job, his investments, his next big promotion. I'd listen and nod and smile, my hands folded in my lap, hiding the ache that grew a little deeper each time. "Mom, you should see the new project I'm heading," he'd say, eyes bright with pride. 6-figure contract. They said I'm the youngest manager they've ever promoted to this level. "That's wonderful, baby," I'd tell him, squeezing his hand. "I'm so proud of you." And I was. Lord knows I was. But pride and worry can live in the same heart. And mine was full of both. Because every time he spoke, I heard something missing. Some foundation that wasn't there anymore. He talked about success like it was armor. Like if he built his life strong enough, nothing could ever hurt him. But I'd lived long enough to know, the strongest towers fall the hardest when the wind changes. One Sunday, after he'd finished telling me about his latest achievement, I asked him gently, "Daniel, have you been taking care of yourself? You look tired, baby." He waved me off. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy. That's what success looks like." "And your spirit?" I pressed softly. "When's the last time you sat still long enough to hear yourself think? To pray? To just breathe?" His face shifted then. Not angry, but uncomfortable. Like I'd touched a nerve he didn't want exposed. "Mom, I told you. I don't need all that. Prayer, church, all of it, that's your thing. It works for you and that's great. But I've got my own way of handling life." "And what way is that, baby?" Hard work. Planning. Being smart about my choices. He leaned back in his chair, confident. I respect what you believe, but I'm doing fine without it. I don't need anyone holding my hand. Not even God. The word stung, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded and cleared his plate, humming one of my hymns under my breath. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. Daniel kissed my forehead before he left. Same as always. But as I watched him drive away in his shiny black car, I felt it. That sinking feeling in my chest that only a mother knows. The kind that tells you a storm is coming, even when the skies are clear. I kept praying for him. Every single morning. Some days I'd pray for his success. Other days, I'd pray for his humility. Most days, I'd just pray that when life got hard, because it always does, he'd remember where his strength really came from. But as the months passed, Daniel's visits became shorter, more rushed. He'd stop by for 20 minutes, eat half a plate, check his phone a dozen times, and leave with a distracted kiss on my cheek. Love you, Mom. Gotta run. And just like that, he'd be gone again. I tried not to take it personally. I knew he was busy. I knew the world moved fast for young people now. But there was something else too. Something he wasn't saying. I'd catch him staring off into space sometimes. Jaw tight, eyes distant. When I'd ask him what was wrong, he'd flash that confident smile and say, "Nothing I can't handle." But a mother knows. We always know. Then one morning, about 6 months after that Sunday conversation, I woke up with a weight on my chest I couldn't explain. It wasn't physical, it was spiritual. The kind of knowing that settles deep in your bones and won't let go. I prayed harder that morning than I had in years. I didn't even know what I was praying for. Just that my boy needed covering. Needed protection. Needed something he didn't even know he was missing. 2 days later, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I fumbled for it in the dark, heart already pounding. No one calls at 2 a.m. with good news. "Mom!" Daniel's voice cracked through the line, barely a whisper. "Baby? What's wrong?" Silence. Long and heavy. "Daniel." His breath hitched. "I don't know what to do anymore." My heart shattered right there in the darkness. "Where are you, baby?" "Home. I'm at home." "But Mom." His voice broke completely. "Everything's falling apart." I sat up in bed, clutching the phone to my chest, my pulse racing as his sobs echoed through the line. This was my son. My strong, confident, untouchable son. Crumbling into pieces I couldn't see but could feel in every fiber of my being. "I'm coming," I whispered. "Stay right there, baby. I'm coming." But as I hung up and reached for my robe in the dark, one thought burned through my mind like a prayer I couldn't shake. How long had he been falling? And why hadn't he let me catch him sooner? I drove through the empty streets that night like my life depended on it, because his did. The city lights blurred past my windshield, and my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. All I could hear was the sound of my boy's voice breaking apart on that phone call. And all I could feel was the weight of every prayer I'd whispered for him over the years, wondering if I'd prayed hard enough, if I'd loved him loud enough, if somehow I could have stopped this fall before it began. But that's the thing about pride, child. It builds walls so high that even a mother's love can't always climb over them. Sometimes you have to wait for those walls to crumble on their own. Welcome back, my dear. You're still here with Grandma Alice Stories, and I'm grateful you stayed. Pour yourself another cup because this chapter gets heavy. This is where we see what happens when a man who thought he needed nothing realizes he's been running on empty all along. Sometimes the lessons that save us are the ones that break us first. When I pulled up to Daniel's apartment building, the sight of it made my stomach turn. All that glass and steel and modern perfection, it looked cold even in the darkness. I'd only been here a handful of times, and each visit felt more like a museum than a home. Beautiful to look at, but nothing you could touch. Nothing that wrapped around you like comfort. I took the elevator up to the 14th floor, my heart hammering with every ding of the numbers climbing higher. When the doors opened, I practically ran down the hallway to his door. I knocked softly. "Daniel? Baby, it's Mama." The door opened, and what I saw broke me. My son, my strong, successful, put-together son, stood there looking like a ghost of himself. His eyes were red and swollen, his hair a mess, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days. The apartment behind him was dark except for the glow of his laptop screen on the coffee table, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the little boy he used to be. The one who'd run to me when he scraped his knee. The one who'd cry in my arms after a bad dream. "Mama," he whispered, and his voice cracked like shattered glass. I didn't say a word. I just opened my arms, and he fell into them like a man drowning, finally finding something solid to hold on to. He sobbed into my shoulder, deep, guttural sobs that shook his whole body. I held him tight, one hand on the back of his head, the other rubbing circles on his back the way I did when he was small. "I'm here, baby," I whispered. "I'm here. Let it out." We stood there in that doorway for what felt like forever. Me holding my grown son while he cried out years of pressure, stress, and pride he'd been carrying alone. When he finally pulled back, his face was wet with tears, and his eyes held a kind of emptiness I'd never seen before. "Come sit down," I said gently, guiding him inside. "Tell Mama what happened." He sank onto the couch like his legs couldn't hold him anymore, and I sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. It was cold, trembling. For a long moment, he just stared at the floor, trying to find the words. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "The company's investigating me for fraud." My heart dropped. "What?" "My business partner." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "The guy I trusted with everything. He's been embezzling funds for months, doctoring records, and he set it up to look like it was me. Like I was the one stealing." His hands clenched into fists. "I didn't even know until the auditors showed up at my office 3 days ago. They froze my accounts, Mom, seized my assets. They're talking about criminal charges." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Daniel, that's not even the worst part." He looked at me then, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. "I went to the people I thought were my friends, the ones I'd helped build their careers, the ones I'd trusted. And you know what they did?" His voice broke. "They turned their backs on me. Every single one of them. Said they couldn't afford to be associated with someone under investigation. Said it would damage their reputations." "Oh, baby. I've lost everything, Mom." The words came out strangled. "My job, my savings, my reputation. People I thought would stand by me won't even return my calls." He buried his face in his hands. "And the worst part? I have no one to blame but myself. I was so busy building this empire, being successful, proving I didn't need anyone. I didn't see it coming. I didn't see any of it coming." I squeezed his hand tighter, feeling his pain radiate through me like my own. "What about your lawyer? Surely they can prove." "My lawyer says it's complicated. It'll take months, maybe years to untangle. And even if they clear my name, the damage is done. No one's going to hire someone who's been accused of fraud, guilty or not." He looked at me with eyes that held nothing but defeat. "I built my whole life on being smart, being in control, being untouchable. And in 3 days, it all came crashing down." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son sit there, broken and lost, and I felt that familiar tug in my spirit. The one that told me this wasn't just about a business scandal or betrayal. This was about something deeper, something he'd been running from for years. "Daniel," I said softly, "when's the last time you slept? Really slept?" He shook his head. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see everything falling apart. The accusations, the looks on people's faces, the bills I can't pay." He laughed without humor. You know what's funny? I used to think I had it all figured out. Thought I was invincible. Thought faith and prayer were just crutches for people who couldn't handle life on their own. And now, his jaw tightened. Now I'm the one who can't handle it. And I don't have anything to hold on to. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face again. You were right, Mom. All those years, you were right. I pushed away the only thing that could have kept me grounded. And now I'm drowning. My heart ached for him, but I also felt something else rising in my chest. Not pride, but a quiet knowing. The kind that comes from watching life teach the lessons you couldn't. I reached up and cupped his face in my hands, the way I used to when he was a boy. Listen to me, Daniel. You're not drowning. You're being humbled. There's a difference. How is this not drowning? His voice cracked with desperation. Because drowning means there's no way up. But humbling? That means you're being brought back down to solid ground so you can rebuild on something real. I wiped his tears with my thumb. You thought you didn't need anyone, baby. Not me. Not God. Not anybody. You thought success meant standing alone. But the truth is, the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who know who to reach for when they do. He closed his eyes, more tears spilling over. I don't even know how to reach anymore, Mom. I don't know how to pray. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, I whispered. Just listen. I pulled him close again, and this time I began to hum. Softly at first, then stronger. The same hymn I'd sung every morning for 40 years. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. His body tensed at first, like he wanted to resist, but slowly, I felt him soften. Felt his breathing slow. Felt the fight leave his shoulders as the melody wrapped around us both. I've been praying for you every single day, I whispered into his hair. Even when you said you didn't need it. Even when you walked away. A mother's prayers don't stop just because her child stops listening. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know, baby. I know. We sat there in that dark apartment, holding each other while the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. But for the first time in days, maybe years, he wasn't carrying it alone. As the night stretched on and Daniel finally fell asleep on my shoulder, exhausted from crying, I stared out at the city lights beyond his window. My boy was broken. His life was shattered. But sitting there in the quiet darkness, I felt something shift. Not a solution, not an answer, but a beginning. Because sometimes, child, we have to lose everything we think we need before we can find what we've been missing all along. But morning was still coming, and I wasn't done praying yet. They say the darkest hour comes just before dawn. And sitting there in my son's cold apartment that night, I finally understood what those words truly meant. Daniel was broken in ways I'd never seen before. Not just his career or his reputation, but something deeper. His spirit, his foundation. Everything he'd built his identity on had crumbled to dust. And now he was left standing in the rubble, trying to remember who he was before the world told him who to be. But here's what I knew that he didn't yet. Sometimes God has to strip everything away before he can build something that'll last. Sometimes the fall isn't the end. It's the mercy that saves you from a harder crash later on. Welcome back, my dear. You're still here with Grandma Alice Stories, and that means something. It means you understand that the best lessons aren't always easy to hear, but they're necessary. Before we continue, if these stories touch your heart, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we drop videos like this daily, and I'd hate for you to miss the wisdom coming your way. Now pour that tea and settle in, because this is where everything changes. I stayed with Daniel for 3 days. Not because he asked me to, but because a mother knows when her child needs her, even when he's too proud or too broken to say the words. That first night, after he finally cried himself to sleep, I cleaned his apartment, washed the dishes piled in the sink, threw out the takeout containers, opened the curtains to let the morning light back in. The place had been beautiful once, But now it just felt like a tomb. All cold surfaces and empty spaces. No pictures on the walls. No warmth. Nothing that said home. It was the kind of place a man lives in when he's so busy building a life that he forgets to actually live one. When Daniel woke up the next morning, he found me in his kitchen making breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon. Simple things, but the smell alone seemed to bring something back to his eyes. Something human. He stood in the doorway in his wrinkled clothes, hair sticking up, looking lost. "You didn't have to stay, Mom," he said quietly. I set a plate in front of him. "Sit down and eat, baby." He obeyed like a child, and I watched him take his first real meal in days. For a while, we didn't talk. Just sat there in the morning light, the silence filled with everything we couldn't say yet. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were red but clearer than they'd been the night before. "What do I do now?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "How do I come back from this?" I poured myself some coffee and sat across from him. "You start by getting honest, Daniel. Not with me. Not with your lawyers or the investigators. With yourself." He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, baby, that this didn't start with your business partner betraying you. This started years ago when you decided you could carry the whole world on your shoulders alone." I held his gaze, gentle but firm. "You built your life on control, on being the smartest person in the room, on never needing anyone's help, not even God's. And the thing about foundations built on pride, they crack under weight they were never meant to carry." His jaw tightened, and I saw the old Daniel flicker back for just a moment, the defensive one, the one who didn't like being told he was wrong. But then something in him broke again, softer this time. He nodded slowly. I know I did this to myself." "No, honey." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You didn't do this to yourself. Life did this for you. Because if you'd kept going the way you were, building higher and higher on sand, the fall would have been so much worse. This," I squeezed his hand, "this is mercy, baby. It hurts like hell, but it's mercy." Tears welled up in his eyes again. "It doesn't feel like mercy, Mom. It feels like I'm being punished." "I know it does, but sometimes the things that save us feel like punishment first." I paused, letting the words settle. "You told me you didn't need my prayers. You didn't need faith. You didn't need anything but your own strength. So tell me, how's that strength holding up now?" He looked down, shame washing over his face. "It's not. I have nothing left." "Exactly." I stood up and moved to sit beside him, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "And that's exactly where God can finally reach you. Because as long as you were standing tall on your own, there was no room for anything else. But now there's space. Now you're low enough to hear what you've been missing all along." Daniel leaned into me, his head resting on my shoulder like he used to do when he was small. "I don't even know how to pray anymore, Mom. I don't know what to say." "Then start with the truth," I whispered. "Tell him you're scared. Tell him you're lost. Tell him you need help. That's all prayer is, baby. Just being honest with the only one who already knows your heart anyway." We sat there for a long time, and then quietly I began to pray. Out loud. My voice soft but steady, filling that cold apartment with words that had carried me through my own storms. I prayed for my son's heart, for his restoration, for truth to come to light, for peace in the chaos, for strength in the weakness. And as I prayed, I felt Daniel's body begin to tremble beside me. Not from fear this time, but from something breaking open inside him. Something that had been locked away for too long. When I finished, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mama, for everything, for pushing you away, for thinking I didn't need you, for mocking what you believe. I forgive you, baby," I said, kissing the top of his head. "I forgave you the moment you said it." Over the next 2 days, we fell into a rhythm. I'd wake up early, light a candle in his living room, and sing my hymns while the sun came up. The first morning, Daniel stayed in his room, but I heard his door crack open slightly. The second morning, he stood in the hallway, watching from the shadows. The third morning, he sat on the couch beside me. Didn't sing, didn't pray, just listened. And that was enough. He started opening up more, telling me about the pressure he'd been under for years, the fear of failure that drove him harder and harder, the loneliness of always having to be the strong one, the smart one, the one with all the answers. He told me about the nights he'd lie awake, terrified that if he stopped moving, stopped achieving, stopped proving himself, he'd realize he was empty inside. I thought success would fill me, he admitted one evening as we sat on his balcony watching the sunset. But the more I got, the emptier I felt. And I didn't know how to stop, didn't know how to ask for help. Because asking for help felt like admitting I'd failed. "You haven't failed, Daniel," I said softly. "You've just been fighting the wrong battle. You've been trying to prove you're enough when the truth is, none of us are. That's not defeat, baby. That's freedom. Because once you stop trying to be everything, you can finally let God be something." He looked at me, tears glistening in his eyes. "Do you really think I can come back from this?" "I don't think it, honey. I know it." I took his hand. "Because you're not coming back to what you were. You're being rebuilt into something stronger, something real. And this time, you won't be building it alone." That night, before I left to go back to my own house, Daniel did something I never thought I'd see again. He knelt beside his bed, that expensive king-sized bed in his cold, modern apartment, and he prayed, out loud, stumbling over words, voice cracking, tears streaming down his face. But he prayed, and I stood in the doorway, my own tears falling, thanking God for breaking my boy just enough to save him. As I drove home that night, my heart was full in a way it hadn't been in years. Daniel's life was still a mess. The legal battle was still ahead of him. The betrayal still stung. The future was still uncertain. But something had shifted. Something foundational. He'd finally stopped running from the one thing that could hold him when everything else let go. And as I pulled into my driveway and saw the light I'd left on in my window, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. Because sometimes, child, the greatest miracles aren't the ones that fix everything instantly. They're the ones that teach us who to lean on when everything falls apart. And my son, he was finally learning to lean. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Grandma Alice drops wisdom like this every single day, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Until tomorrow, my dear, remember that falling isn't failing. Sometimes it's the only way to find solid ground.